webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar, and thank you to attendees for joining us. Today's webinar will help attendees gain more strategic insight into underlying cost structures and ultimate profitability. It is hosted by Tom Gargas, Director of Solutions Consulting at Edgewater Ranzel. First, we have the pleasure of having Joseph Prunty provide an introduction. Joe is Area Vice President of Modern Finance Solutions at Oracle. Joe?
Appreciate it, Joey. Thanks, folks, and thanks to everyone for joining. This is an incredibly important topic, and first and foremost, we're really thankful for the partnership we have with the folks at Edgewater Ranzel. They're doing some really incredibly innovative things across our solution set, but for the purposes of today, we'll focus on one of those solutions that Oracle refers to as Profitability and Cost Management Cloud Services, shortened to a rather lengthy acronym of PCMCS. And so it's an incredibly important time for financial services folks, both in terms of their adoption of cloud strategy, but also in their quest to understand how to make more money and how to drive both top and bottom line growth in the organization. So if we look at financial services in whole, and I'm bundling banking, capital markets, and the insurance sector all together in North America, certainly the increased cost of regulations is putting a drain on bottom line growth for any financial services organization. Tons of expense coming out of SOX, tons of expense coming out of the financial crisis of 2008, and continued regulations, whether it be CECL, whether it be CCAR, depending on your organization, whether it be IFRS 17 in the insurance space. The cost of regulation is not going to change. And so, of course, that puts a big impact on bottom line. If we then add to that the disruption by fintechs, whether it be in any of those three spaces, banking, cap markets, or insurance, there's a ton of money. I think in 2017, the amount of private equity and venture capital money raised for fintechs exceeded $50 billion US. So they're disrupting in every space. And so we need to continue to look at that, and the focus for our more legacy institutions, particularly with changing demographics. And so a lack of brand loyalty. Folks can buy services online. They don't necessarily keep 3, 4, 5 accounts with one financial institution because, frankly, there are better servicing options, better product options, better pricing options available out there in the marketplace, whether it be with a legacy provider or with some of the fintechs that are disrupting. And so before I pass it over to Tom, what I wanted to do is just very quickly talk about this from a numbers perspective. Unless your organization is deploying an application, and I do work for Oracle, so we'd like to think you'd be deploying or thinking about deploying one of our applications. But unless you're doing that, unless you're using an application and managing your environment and using the services of folks who are really experienced in this, like the folks at Edgewater Ranzel, the best you can hope for as an organization is that around 20%, could be slightly higher, could be slightly lower, but around 20% of your customers are driving approximately 150% of your net income before taxes. So 20% driving 150% of net income. And for those of us with any skills at math, we realize you can't have 150%, which means the other 80% of the customer base of most of our financial institutions either break even or they lose 50% of the net income driven by that smaller 20% group. So just minor modifications in that 21-50 rule, increasing the profit of the 20% to maybe 165 or 170%. Better yet, grabbing a big chunk of the customer base who are probably just breaking even and getting them to just moderately make improvements to the contributions to the organization have a significant impact on the bottom line. And then certainly for those folks that are eating away at that net income driven by the smaller percent of customers, be nice to know who they are, what products they have, what channels they're being serviced through, what pricing we as management inside these organizations give away in terms of products and product promotions to erode that. And so all of that can have a significant impact, well beyond the cost of our solutions, well beyond the cost of implementation assistance. The numbers are fairly staggering. And so with that, what I wanted to do is turn it over to Tom and have Tom lead us through the rest of the seminar. And certainly, again, appreciate Edgewater Ranzel's help in this, their capabilities, broad set of capabilities, both for our profitability application and across the broader product set that we offer to banking, capital markets, and insurance companies in North America. Tom?
costing today, if you notice, profitability and cost management is right in the middle. I often say it's a unit of operations because allocations and costing can be involved in both the planning side and the consolidation side. Fortunately, Oracle Hyperion Profitability and Cost Management Cloud Service is fully integrated. It's built on Hyperion DNA, so you can take advantage of the integrated master data and data integration layer, as well as being able to provide information to stakeholders, users, upper management via a number of different ways, whether it's the web, mobile devices, spreadsheets, dashboards, data visualization, and so forth. Again, our focus today is right in the middle, a product known as Profitability and Cost Management Cloud Service. Some of the challenges financial services firms have endured in recent years, quite simply, it's a very dynamic environment, a tremendous amount of regulatory pressure, security and privacy concerns, restoring confidence in the industry, and in recent years, competing with aggressive, innovative, and not so traditional competitors. At the same time, always pressures to find new and interesting ways to generate revenue, and pressure on asset quality vis-a-vis loan portfolios and strengthening capital positions. This is just a short summary of some of the challenges. I'm sure there's many more, but quite often, financial services firm really look immediately to their cost side, their internal costs, to see how they can best optimize their internal resources and utilize those resources for the consuming departments in order for those departments to react to the industry effectively, quickly, and to be able to take what little internal money they can take and maximize it in order to, again, compete with new competitors, compete within a highly regulated environment, and especially generate new revenue. So quite simply, the way that these financial services firms really start off with is looking at a P&L and understanding where they're making money, where they're spending money, and how this information is viewed by lines of business, by product, by customer, by market, by channel. There's lots of standard processes to really reflect the revenue, but especially on the indirect side and the indirect expense side, their internal processes don't exactly align the costs to their lines of business. So there's a greater need for more of a strategic P&L in order to properly view and to be able to view their internal costs, be able to set a plan for how those costs will be consumed, and then monitor those changes in a highly dynamic, very challenging environment. What we've often seen among our project base is a traditional overhead expense allocation process. The level of detail may change client by client, but quite typically we see group overhead expenses alongside with shared services departments, those costs being pushed down to the division. Now, in this example, we see Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. They can go down to some level of detail that represents a line of business. In turn, each division can also take the costs that it inherited from the group, as well as its own overhead expenses, and push those down to their respective lines of business, by channel, by fund. Like I said, the level of detail may be different, but we've seen as the continuous or consistent use case among financial services firms, moving from a more summary level allocations to something a little bit more detailed that it can truly manage your strategic P&L. Now, clients have done a number of things in the past in order to support this use case. Like all finance and accounting people, they often start with spreadsheets and or possibly configuring the ERP system to support actuals, a combination of both, and possibly even a custom-built solution, especially to handle budget as well. And there's a number of different applications and tools and so forth, but each one of these options, spreadsheets, ERP, and custom-built solutions, really have their own challenges, and at the end of the day, by the time those allocations are done, the resultant information is stale, and in turn, the clients don't have the information they need at a quick minute in order to adapt to the industry. That's why a packaged application is needed, because it offers flexibility, transparency, scalability, and especially the ability to standardize the solution in a centralized environment, but at the same time provide a means to adapt quickly and provide that information quickly to stakeholder users. And that's our exact focus here today. PCMCS being a packaged application, we can really showcase each one of those key value propositions in order for financial services firms to support their allocation and costing needs. Now I have a demo application, as you can see on the screen, called Financial Services PCM. And a way I like to start these demonstrations is to really showcase our process from a dimensional perspective. Now, by dimensions, rest assured, this application is powered by Essbase, the industry-leading analytical engine, been around for at least 20 years. The way I've structured this demonstration is following a traditional overhead expense allocation process, more of a waterfall, where I'm taking information by account, by entity, allocating these accounts and entities to activities, and in turn from activities down to lines of business, being represented by products. So my products are fixed income, equities, and if we drill down our dimension, we see core bond fund or high yield bond. So the allocations will be by product, by region, which is just a simple geographical representation. And then lastly, by channel. So if I drill down on channel, we can see U.S. institutional, global, direct, retirement. Now this is just a small sampling, but it's nice to know that this application, while structured and packaged to support profitability and costing, really is dimensional in nature. So any organization that understands Essbase and or planning, being that they both run on Essbase, the Essbase engine, this PCMCS also runs on Essbase. Therefore, it's a rather short learning curve to take on this new application to support your allocation needs. If I'm an end user or perhaps an allocation specialist and I wanted to get a state of where my allocations are today, whether it's pre-allocated financials, whether I wanted to validate my drivers and so forth, there's a number of different consuming reports that I can take advantage of built into the application based on my specific need. I can click on my dashboards, where any power user or end user can just drag and drop views of information, so he or she can see summary financials by department, or perhaps my volume driver by line of business, or be able to understand the trends in my allocated costs by product, by channel. Highly graphical, very simple to use, very simple to access. If an end user wanted to see a little bit more detail, we can quickly click on our intelligence card. Intelligence provides a number of different ways of viewing data. These simple online reports allow me to, I often say, taste my data. Very simple, unformatted, but quick to get an understanding of what my data looks like, especially after I've loaded in my recent batch of financials in there. I can also see my post-allocated data directly in the tool, and at the same time export this back into Excel for me to put this in a PowerPoint or email it to an end user. I can also visually trace on my information. For example, if I wanted to trace my allocations and see the volume of activity and the percentage contribution by account, I can just click on my account dimension, choose the level of detail in my account hierarchy, and then trace backward and forward at will. Here we can see the total volume of my financials that I loaded in was just shy of $16,000. Again, this is just demo data. I can drill down to see all the rules, the allocation rules, which you'll see in a little bit, that were involved in the allocation. Let me change my view. I can actually make it more simple. I can highlight each rule and it'll give me a description. So rule number 3 really involved the legal department allocations as part of my overall corporate overhead and shared services part of the sequence. And then I can drill down to see the accounts that were involved in the allocations. Salary, bonuses, part-time, etc. Lastly, I can utilize structured reports via Financial Reporting Web Studio. And I've purposely designed this report to show the difference between my actuals allocations and then a what if scenario. Right now, my what if scenario is identical to actuals. I haven't modified it. That's sort of the last thing I'm going to show you in this webinar. But we can see here, these are all my products by region, by channel of distribution. So these are post-allocated data, and I see there's no variance between actuals and what if. We're actually going to change the model in this webinar to see how easy it is to change the model in a what if capacity. So now that I've showed you numerous ways of consuming our information, whether it's pre-allocated data, data validation, or our published allocations, let's look at the heart and soul of the product. The heart and soul of the product involves rules. And allocation rules are part science, part process, meaning there's a structured way of building these rules. They're tied to a unique point of view, such as my December year-to-date 2017 actuals. It can also be done monthly. It can also be done quarterly. It can also be done for the budget or perhaps a different year. Now, these rule sets in the middle are what represents our step-down process, our waterfall. And in this example, I have three sequences or stages, whatever you want to call them. My first sequence is essentially my corporate overhead and shared service allocations. And this is basically taking my shared service allocations like IT or legal or HR and pushing them down to consuming departments. IT is my favorite one, so I'm going to focus in on that. And we can see the IT allocations rule is the first step of our step-down process, where we're allocating it to consuming departments based on the number of devices, or it could be the number of PCs. I often say if you know how to navigate through dimensions in SmartView or SBase, you pretty much figured out half the solution right here. In this example, we're grabbing our general expenses, basically some operating expenses. It can be summary or detail for a specific department in our source tab, which is IT. And then we're sending them to our destination. The account dimension will be the same because I've chosen same as source, but we're sending them to many departments, consuming departments, such as business operations or HR or the executive office. Well, that makes sense because IT supports devices and IT services to other internal departments. The driver that we're going to use is a statistical account called number of devices. So this is essentially the heart of the solution, rules that are organized in rule sets representing a certain common sequence to the overall waterfall process. And then if you put them in sequence, they'll actually take the data from your source to the destination using a driver, that will compute the pro rata share and move those costs to the consuming departments. Another simple example is facilities. Facilities is basically supporting all the facilities and expenses involved in facilities for the entire organization, and it's utilizing a driver called square footage. That's essentially done by, again, choosing a department and account combination. Our department of interest is facilities. We're sending facilities-related expenses to other consuming departments, such as business operations, corporate finance, and compliance services. And again, utilizing a driver called an account called square footage. So as we organize our rules, depending on our process, or I would actually like to say the enhanced process, since this is a new tool and we're going to change the process and make it better, we can organize these rules into rule sets, put them in a specific waterfall, and then push that down to the final views. Our last sequence in our step is basically taking our expenses that have been incurred, as well as the department's own operating expenses, and pushing them down to lines of business, product, channel, and region by other key drivers as well, such as volume or revenue or even percent drivers. That will support the allocations exactly the way we want to see it. And given that this is a packaged application, this will give stakeholders the confidence that this is a consistent and repeatable process overall. At the end of the day, when the model is done, we can review the model directly in the system. Let me just refresh my screen. and we can see all of our financial data, which is again just shy of 16,000, and how it moved through this three-stage model, and see all the ins and the outs according to each rule. This is one of my favorite reports because it's canned. It just comes with the product. All I need to do is basically align it with the model assigned to this unique point of view, and we can see what all the ins and the outs are, and if there's any changes between the allocation in and the allocation out. To showcase some of the flexibility in the solution, what I'm going to take liberty of doing now is really copying my model. Now that I know it's fully complete, and send it to my what if model. So without having to write a line of code or contact financial systems or IT, I can take my existing model, which is December year-to-date actuals, and all the rules that I just showed you, and copy it to nearly the same point of view, to its destination. But in this example, I'm copying it to a scenario called what if 1. So all the data, which is financial and driver, as well as the entire methodology, has been copied over to my what if 1. Let me just check the job status to see if it completed. It should be very quick. Success. Now I can go change my model back in my rules editor. But in this case, instead of focusing our attention on the actual scenario, I'm going to look at that exact same model in my what if scenario. Now I can go here and change the methodology. I'll make just a couple of simple changes here. I'll go to my revenue, my portfolio management allocations via revenue allocation, and I'll keep almost everything the same. But instead of utilizing a driver, such as revenue, I'm just going to state allocate evenly and save it. I'll also go back to my rule set 1, and I'll do the same thing. I'll allocate my HR allocations, and I'll do that evenly as well, as opposed to utilizing headcount as a driver. The most typical use case for a what if scenario is if you wanted to incorporate a new methodology or a new driver. This is where you would do it in a safe and secure way, and it's entirely user-friendly. You don't have to contact anyone in IT or financial systems to help you on in that process. Now that I've made 2 small changes to my what if model, I need to recalculate my data. So I'll go back to calculation. And just run all the rules. Notice here, my scenario is what if. So I'll run the rule. The job's been kicked off. And then I'll go back to my job library. And there it is, it's a success. The way we test our data is simply going back to that standard report that I showed you a little bit earlier, to show us the difference between my actuals allocation model and then my what if allocation model, which had those 2 small changes in the rules. Here's my report. The report's built with prompting, so I'm just going to choose what if 1. And there we have it. Now, by product, by region, by channel, we now see differences in the allocation process between actuals and what if. And this really showcases the flexibility in the solution, how we can make changes to our methodology in a safe and secure and in a consistent and very transparent way. All these rules that I showed you behind the scenes do not have one line of code. So traditionally, Hyperion planning and S-based customers can visualize calculation scripts, but there are none here. This is entirely built into the application in a way that is very easy to understand for any finance users, and the application is self-documenting. So there's system reports built in that can show you a very organized, easy to understand document, especially good for auditors, where you can take you through each rule set, each rule within the rule set, and all the information needed for complete transparency in the solution. So let's go back to the PowerPoint to sort of finish out our webinar. So at the end of the day, Profitability and Cost Management Cloud Service really supports flexibility, accuracy, shared methodology, and transparency. Flexibility is something that you just saw just a little bit ago, where really taking a standard approach and being able to rapidly evolve it and change the methodology in a safe and secure what-if way. Accuracy is really about a standard application, relying on a standard application that can give stakeholders the confidence in the data being produced in a very consistent way, as opposed to worrying about manual errors done in an Excel spreadsheet. Shared methodology is really about having consistent methodology, using the same methodology for actuals and budget, and even if there's differences between the two, how to have a very transparent way to display those differences. And again, it goes to giving key stakeholders confidence in the data being produced. And then transparency, utilizing any one of the reporting tools, dashboards, analysis views, profit charts, traceability views, standard structuredized reports, and of course, the ever popular Smart View for Excel for ad hoc self-service reporting. Even though all these four are important, Renzel tends to see flexibility and transparency as key drivers to financial services firms to allocate their internal costs down to lines of business, and especially in a challenging environment, in order to best allocate their costs to the correct consuming departments. So here's a summary slide that really just showcases some of the core capabilities of Profitability Cost Management Cloud Service. It is a Hyperion product. It has been built from the ground up using Hyperion DNA, as I say. It's not an acquired product. It's entirely structured to support allocations and costing, scenario and what-if modeling, with built-in dimensions that you can enhance, and you can utilize the standard packaged application for a number of different use cases. If anyone in the audience is interested in getting to know more about PCMCS and for Edgewater Renzel to conduct an assessment workshop, a free one-day assessment workshop, feel free to contact us at the number below or email us at info@renzel.com. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call us at the numbers you see below on the screen or email us at info@renzel.com. Thank you.